It happens. I understand. I'm boring as hell.
No, it's not you.
It's like we're rolling on 4 hours now. I understand. So moisture and heat can cause volatilization, right? So, so you got to mulch or do something over top. A great way to combat this is to use a water-soluble nitrogen source so that when you put it into the soil, it goes and percolates down and it can't be affected by the sun or the temperature. Okay? Be a responsible fertilizer. Incorporate into soil or a liquid. So you can till it in or somehow manipulate it with the soil or use a liquid. Leaching or running off. As nitrogen changes through its different forms because of microorganisms, they're really susceptible to leaching. So leaching meaning basically getting washed out of the soil because it's not able to bond with a soil surface. Usually because of the colloid charge properties. The nitrogen can be carried by water, and it is a awful groundwater pollutant. Just going on with the whole farmers are guilty of eutrophication, all the coral reefs, all that good stuff. Anybody heard of blue baby syndrome? Blue baby syndrome is very, very common in the third world, especially in Africa, right about the 1980s, right about when the UN started giving conventional fertilizers to local farmers in Africa without teaching them how to use it. A friend of mine went out to Ghana and did, Peace Corps out there. And he saw all these bags, and these blue bags, there's a UN on the side, just giving this stuff out to people without any training on how to use it. They called it the magic. And they would go out and they'd take a bag of this stuff and they'd walk down their row and just dump the whole bag down the row. And then they're done with the row and the bag's gone. 50 pounds of it. Just put it right in there. And the next row, they'd go to this giant pile of blue bags that the UN gave them and go grab another one. And then they walk over and they put it down. Nobody taught them how to use this stuff. About 4 or 5 years later, all the infants in the villages started dying off. They all had blue baby syndrome. Basically because all that nitrogen that the UN had given them for free and not taught them how to use it started going into the groundwater. Babies started drinking mothers started drinking groundwater, which is very, very high in nitrogen, which they could handle. But when they started breastfeeding their children, it's high nitrogen and started killing them. The mothers were killing the babies with their breast milk because the farmers were not taught how to use the right fertilizer or the fertilizers correctly. Okay? So, major groundwater pollutant. You can lose nitrogen by crop removal. Remember I said that farmer doesn't till in his crop? You can also just go out into the field and, like sugarcane folks, they go out and pick that sugarcane and then they burn it. All that nitrogen they put into the soil and get absorbed by that, all just turned into gas, poof, gone. So, crop removal, certainly a bad way to lose nitrogen. Your crop materials, like those corn stalks and all that good stuff, is 2 to 4% nitrogen. I mean, that's the same as a fertilizer. There's organic fertilizers that are 2 to 4. I mean, you could essentially go out, grab your corn plants that you harvested from, chop them all up, and use that as a 2 to 4% nitrogen fertilizer. But most farmers will just chop it away and throw it away. So there's loss. Phosphorus has a cycle, just like nitrogen has a cycle. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I want you to understand that it does have a cycle very similar to the nitrogen cycle. All right? We're talking about functions of phosphorus. Phosphorus is critical to early development, growth and flowering during the fruiting phase especially. It's important for energy transfer. Usually need about 10 times less than N and K. And it's used to create, within the plant structure, biochemicals and enzymes. It's a tool for photosynthesis, cell division, and seed formation. Deficiency symptoms, decrease in growth, slow maturity. Boy, that sounds a lot like nitrogen. Older leaves turn a purple color. Just translocation. Translocation is the process on which a plant needs a nutrient to do a certain function. Realizes it doesn't have that nutrient available in the soil, so it starts taking it from other areas of itself. So it'll start like this. If there's a phosphorus deficiency, it will start taking the chlorophyll and the energy producing cells and materials from this leaf and pull it out so that it can give it to the area of new growth. So then this leaf is left turning purple, eventually can't do any kind of sugar production and dies off. Sure, the plant's okay at the top because it took it from down here and put it up here. But when you're talking about something like coffee plants where they have to retain their leaves and they don't grow them back, this is a huge thing, okay? And then subtle changes in the growth and color. Usually when it comes to phosphorus, if you're seeing any of these symptoms, it's way too late because the phosphorus is so important during that flowering phase. Forms of phosphorus. There's two of them. Very pH dependent. All phosphorus comes in the form of an anion. So when that cation exchange capacity doesn't really come into play. Only thing that comes into play are those tiny, very few receptors that are on the root hair that will accept an anion. Low mobility, meaning it kind of sticks within the environment. Once you put it in there, it doesn't really leach or wash away. P in Hawaiian soils. Iron, aluminum, and calcium react when you add P. That thing where I said that you needed to add a whole bunch of the mineral to make it available to the plant, you need to have the soils absorbing enough of the materials to make it so that there is plants available. That's what I'm talking about. Now, if you chose to add organic matter to your soil, that organic matter will bond to this iron and aluminum and the calcium that is readily found in Hawaiian soils, and it will free up space so that the P can bond with a colloid surface. So if you're having issues where you have to put a whole bunch of P down to get that level where the plants can take it up, if you were to instead basically put down a whole bunch of organic material and then wait like 2 months and then test your soil again, chances are you don't need to put down anywhere near as much P because you've created an environment where that Fe, Al, and Ca just gets knocked off. P moves through diffusion. Remember, like I said right there, moves from one colloid to the next, usually only 2 centimeters in a season. So you got to make sure that when you're talking about P, when you put it into the soil, it's right up next to the plant. If you're spraying phosphorus, liquid phosphorus spray all over the place, you're wasting your money, man, because that stuff, it's only right around the root area are your plant's going to absorb that. So when it's talking about P application, be sure you put it out and it's real close to the plant. Solution forms limited in soil, so add liquid P. That's always my recommendation. If you're going to be adding P to your soil, always use a liquid form. I usually use a liquid form on everything. It has a lot more leaching potential, but it's more readily available for the plants right away. Eutrophication, that is when algae blooms and sea life, we get algae blooms in the water and sea life dies. There's invasive weeds on land and at sea. It's usually because of improper application of P, in addition to nitrogen as well. Potassium, functions of a potassium. Most functions are indirect. Basically, potassium enables a plant to create up to 60 different enzymes. These are like, almost like, well, you know what an enzyme is, right? Growing points in the seeds need potassium. So in order to have growth, and then seed production, it helps with photosynthesis, carbohydrate transport, water regulation, and protein synthesis. It causes disease resistance, increased vegetative growth, drought tolerance, and it gives health to your crop after you harvest. So being sure that you have plenty of potassium near the end of the cycle of the plant is important. Deficiency symptoms of potassium: molted, spotted, streaking, or curled leaves, scorched or burned dead leaf tips and margins, stunted root systems, translocated within plants, like I mentioned before with the P. It steals nutrients from other areas, and it causes defoliation. Boy, that sounds a lot like other things. Potassium in the soil. It can only exist in solution. It has low mobility, so it doesn't leach away. And it's dependent on the cation exchange capacity, being that it is a cation. Calcium and magnesium. Calcium function is improved plant vigor, intake of synthesis of other nutrients, and cell wall development. Deficiency symptoms: small developing leaves, wrinkled older leaves, and dead stem tips. Oh, it sounds a lot like nitrogen. Function of magnesium: influence the intake of other nutrients. Super important. You could be adding NPK, calcium, sulfur all day long, but if you're not adding magnesium, the plant ain't absorbing any of that stuff. Produces fats, translocation of phosphorus and fats. Deficiency symptoms: intervenal chlorosis. Intervenal, meaning between the veins. Chlorosis is yellowing. So if you have yellowing between the veins stay green and the areas between them turn yellow, you're looking at magnesium most likely. The curling of leaf tips upward is a great indication. It's one of the only ones that causes your leaf tips to go up, make a little cup. Slender, weak stems. Sulfur, functions of sulfur. You got the sulfur deficient and the normal up there. Promote root growth and vigorous vegetative growth. Deficiency symptoms: young leaves are light green with lighter color veins, yellow leaves, and stunted growth. And I have up here the functions and symptoms of all of the micros. I'm not going to read them out to you. But at the same time, you got to realize that all these symptoms start looking alike. Especially when you go through this one, it's really hard to distinguish what one is or what it possibly could be. Mainly because it's usually a combination of a few things. So, that being said, what's the best way to figure out how many nutrients your plant has, or if it's healthy or not? Do a tissue sample, and you send that off for analysis. It's really one of the only ways to find out what exactly is your deficiency symptom. What is the cause of your deficiency symptom? Like I said, they all look alike at some point. As much as I know about it, it's very hard for me to walk up to a plant and tell you what's wrong with it. I will give you a list of probably 5 or 6 things that might be, but without a test of the tissue, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Okay? How are we doing on time? Types of fertilizers. Shoosh. And okay, see if I can rush to do this real quick. Complete versus incomplete fertilizers. We're done with ions. We're done with all the chemistry. We're done with all that stuff. How's your brain feel? It hurts a little bit? Good. Now, We're talking about just fertilizers right now. We're talking about the fertilizers you go to the store and buy mostly, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the information contained in there. And then I definitely want to get to the equations, and if we don't get to the last part, then that's fine. Okay, complete versus incomplete. Very simple. The numbers on the side of a bag, NPK, right? You can have a complete, which is going to have some of each one in it. This would be a complete fertilizer. 16, 4, 12, 10, 10, 10, triple 16, complete fertilizer. Incomplete does not have one of all three, or two of all three. So 20-00, blah, 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 blah. Incomplete fertilizer, two different kinds. I only use one kind. This one. Because I know exactly how much of each mineral I'm putting into the soil. I don't have to do too much conversion. I'm knowledgeable enough about nutrients that I can almost a la carte put in what I want. Most folks don't have that kind of knowledge, and they're able to just get what they need there. Problem with these is there's a lot of waste, because I know that my plants need this specific number, where most farmers just assume that that will meet their need, which it usually will. But the problem is some of that nitrogen gets leached down, causes problems, and you become an irresponsible fertilizer. Okay? That's why I use those. Organic. We went through the definitions last time. 100% from plant and animal material and contain carbon compounds. Things like urea, which is dehydrated urine, commonly available. Animal castings and kelp meal, chicken poop. Advantages of organic: slow release, not easily leached out because you have the organic material with it. So, increases in organic matter of the soil. So as you add organic fertilizers, you're also increasing the organic matter in your soil. Disadvantages: sometimes hard to get in large quantities, very expensive, as most people know. If you start farming organically, you realize it's super expensive. Sometimes it's not sterile, has diseases in it. Buy from a reputable source if you're going to. Low nutrient content. Usually the highest you're going to see for nitrogen that I use is going to be feather meal, which is 14-00. That's the highest I can find for nitrogen. Where urea, synthetic ureas or something, are 40. Okay? Low nutrient content, and they still pollute groundwater and oceans if they're used incorrectly. If I walk out there and I dump out 400 bags of chicken manure, well, most of that nitrogen is going to go down into the environment, into the groundwater, so it's not being responsible. Conventional or inorganic, they come from chemical, non-plant-based sources. The advantages: can make desired ration of nutrients. Basically, with my soil analysis, I know exactly how much nitrogen I need to put in. When I look at a conventional fertilizer bag, it's guaranteed that that is the chemical makeup in there. When I look at an organic, it's just at least that much is in there. Okay? They can't tell me more than what is legally in there, I guess. So this is super exact, right? It has a lower cost, and it's pretty easy to get, especially when the UN is buying it for you. Disadvantages: there's no organic material. Causes problems in the carbon-nitrogen ratio. I didn't talk about that, but certainly an issue. There's chemical buildup and becomes a ocean and groundwater pollutant. Natural fertilizers, like organic, they are derived from locally available agriculture, animal-based byproducts or waste materials that incorporate indigenous microorganisms and their processes into production of fertilizers. Just like organic, except for the fact that I'm not shipping anything in, right? It all comes from my backyard. Advantages: naturally derived material stimulates natural processes like microorganisms. It's inexpensive. It usually uses waste materials. They're very site-specific. There's no pollution potential. I mean, when it comes to natural fertilizers, you can't overdo it because the microorganisms start consuming what you put in extra. Slow released, not easily leached, and increases soil organic matter disadvantages, low nutrient content, possibility for disease, and it's very labor intensive to make them.
Question, what's that picture on after you put some fish?
This is fish bones, heads, and stuff. I mix it with sugar. I let it sit for about 2 weeks to 6 months, depending on how long I want. The sugar actually sucks out all the good stuff out of the fish, the nitrogen, lots of calcium, phosphorus, turns it into a liquid form. And then I drain that off and I mix it with water at a 1,000 to 1 ratio, yeah. Only brown sugar is used in natural farming. The white stuff's bleached and has antimicrobial properties, so never use white sugar. Right, Davey? All right, let's do application rates and calculations. Take a breather, I gotta pee. I'll be right back.